Hey everybody, welcome to Crazy Tech Lab, and today we are going to be talking about something slightly different here on the channel, but it's still very much PC hardware focused. But we are going to be discussing a lot of the innovation and implications of this processor here, which is, well, it's a little chip, and it is Intel's Lunar Lake processor, otherwise known as the Core Ultra Series 2. Now, there's already been a bunch of Core Ultra Series 1 or 100 series processors that are in laptops right now that you can buy, and the 200 series or Series 2 of Lunar Lake processors will be out very, very soon. And I saw some pretty awesome examples of this CPU being used in Germany with Intel recently at a pre-IFA event where laptops such as the new Dell XPS, the Asus VivoBook, the LG Gram and the MSI Prestige all had some seriously impressive benchmarks going on, both in terms of battery life, power efficiency, gaming performance, AI performance, and also in processor performance as well. So there's some really, really awesome products coming our way very, very soon with Intel Lunar Lake processors in them. So, but it's not really this processor particularly that I wanted to talk about today, although we are going to be covering that in an interview that I had with Intel in a minute. It's more the implications of this processor and what it means for us on desktop, because Intel announced a pretty significant move with Lunar Lake, which is that it is removing hyperthreading. Now, hyperthreading is the ability for a single processor core to deal with two threads at the same time. And there's a good analogy later on from the guy that I spoke to at Intel, David Feng. We'll get onto that in just a moment. And he likened the compute pipeline to a couple of workers in a car factory dealing with their particular station. So when a car comes along, they bolt a few bits on, and then that car goes away and another car comes along. But in the gap between the first car and the second car on that production line, there's a bit of downtime. Those workers aren't doing anything. So that means that there's a potential there for getting extra stuff done. So if you imagine those guys being able to kind of turn around and look at a car behind them that's waiting for a bit of work done, that means that they're doing something 100% of the time that they're there, rather than having that downtime where they're just kind of sitting twiddling their thumbs. It sounds like a harsh analogy. I'm sure they're not always doing that in car factories, but it's a good analogy anyway. So with a processor, and what Intel decided to do about 20 years ago when it implemented hyperthreading, is making use of that downtime, allowing a single core to deal with two threads. So when there's downtime from one thread, that second thread can be worked on. And that's really boosted multi-threaded performance, and you can easily see that on your processor right now. If you go into the BIOS and you turn off hyperthreading, you'll see a drop in multi-threaded performance especially. Now, hyperthreading does have some downsides. It has higher power consumption, amongst other things, but the really interesting thing about Lunar Lake is that it has a hybrid core architecture. Now, that's not new. Intel has actually had a hybrid core architecture for a while, but it's gradually learning how to make those P cores and E cores, or otherwise known as performance cores and efficient cores, work best both together and on their own. And it's the efficient cores that it's really focusing on with Lunar Lake, and are probably pretty much the main reason why it has ditched hyperthreading. So what we'll be doing is just running through the interview here with David Feng from Intel, who is the Vice President and General Manager of Intel's Client Computing Group. And I met him at Germany's IFA events, or slightly before that this month. And he explained why these hybrid cores, P cores and E cores, mean that hyperthreading no longer really makes sense in processors, especially when it comes to mobile. And as he said in his own words, they can actually result in a net negative overall benefit for modern CPUs. And this is going to have ramifications for desktop CPUs as well, because all the indications are, all the rumors that we've seen show that Intel is probably going to ditch hyperthreading on its desktop Arrow Lake processors coming out later on this year as well. So we know that's going to happen, or we're pretty sure that's going to happen, but what I'll be covering in this interview is why Intel is ditching hyperthreading. So let's crack on with the interview. So I'm going to run through this interview, basically me narrating it, because unfortunately I don't have David with me here, and the interview has kind of already been done, and I wasn't really able to, in the environment where I was able to get an interview done at the event. So my first question to David was, Lunar Lake is a major launch for Intel, and the performance and power efficiency claims are impressive. And I definitely saw some really impressive demos on show at the event. So I was hoping you could maybe explain what the benefits of upgrading to a new laptop would be from someone that maybe owns a laptop that's 4 or 5 years old, has a 10th or 11th gen CPU in there, which is exactly what I have in my laptop here. I got this just before COVID, and it's still got great battery life. It's got a 10th gen processor in there, so it's enough for basic tasks. It's got excellent battery life, easily 8, 9, 10 hours, but it is showing its age. So this interview was kind of really interesting to me, and hopefully it'll be interesting to those of you with old laptops out there and you're looking at what to buy next. So, and also, as well as comparing the performance from an older laptop like this, what about something bought in maybe the last 12 months that has a Meteor Lake processor in there? So, and David's reply was this: the world is a very different place now. If you have a CPU that is 3 or 4 years old, back then, like when we were looking at 10th gen or 11th gen CPUs, we weren't running chat GPTs or AI, and aside from the changes that COVID brought, we now have a whole new appreciation for performance per watt and power efficiency. Not that we didn't care about it back then, but it's a different level of prioritization. Back then, performance was a higher priority, but it's now a much more balanced priority, especially with thin and light devices, focusing on performance and low power at the same time. So that's kind of setting the scene really for what Lunar Lake is all about. It's about increasing performance, but also pushing the metrics and changing the way that things work and are laid out in the CPU in order to maximize battery life and power efficiency as well. So compared to those older CPUs, you'll see significantly more performance and much longer battery life. Modern processors can run new classes of applications powered by AI, and Lunar Lake is also designed to handle AAA games, all on thin and light devices, something you wouldn't even be able to imagine 4 or 5 years ago unless you had a heavy laptop with a discrete GPU. And I can actually, just chipping in here, I can actually confirm that those Lunar Lake processors in those laptops were running games like F1 2024 at ultra settings and 1080p at 60, 70 frames per second, which is really, really interesting given that they don't have an AMD or NVIDIA discrete graphics card on board. It's just done from the integrated graphics on the CPU. So moving on from the older CPUs to something like a more modern Meteor Lake Core Ultra 100 processor or Ultra 1 series to Lunar Lake and the Core Ultra Series 2 or 200 series, you're most likely something of an early adopter or have a high refresh of your technology. So Meteor Lake is still a great design and a cutting edge in many areas such as AI. However, Lunar Lake still offers a significant AI and power efficiency enhancements. That said, Meteor Lake also offers huge benefits compared to 13th gen CPUs, 30 to 40% lower power, for example, and driving the power requirements down even more than we've done before. When we say Lunar Lake has 30% better GPU performance, we're actually comparing that to Meteor Lake H, which is the higher power segment of our Core Ultra 100 series. Compared to Meteor Lake U series, the low power Meteor Lake models, it's an even bigger improvement, probably up to 80% graphics improvement. So that's pretty significant. But even Meteor Lake has far superior graphics performance to earlier models. So what they're basically saying is that over the last couple of generations, they have really, really ramped up performance, especially in the graphics area. So we've moved from just bog standard Intel graphics, which wasn't really good for anything, to now having what is almost or pretty much a fully fledged APU where there's a significant performance benefit compared to previous CPUs when it comes to gaming and just general GPU performance. So it's not just gaming here, it's anything that is potentially GPU accelerated like Photoshop, Premiere Pro and those kind of things. So my next question is, we've had a fairly significant transition from Meteor Lake, which is the current generation of Intel's laptop CPUs, to Lunar Lake, which was announced in Germany a few weeks ago. And what's driven Intel to launch a new generation of CPUs in such a short time frame? And it is a pretty short time frame. Meteor Lake, I think, was launched less than a year ago. So we are seeing a pretty rapid turnaround from one generation to another, and that doesn't normally happen. So David replied, that's a really good question. Silicon usually has a long lead time in terms of designing and bringing a product to market, usually 4 or 5 years. So we're continuously looking at the future architectures on a rolling basis. When planning for the Meteor Lake architecture, we recognize the importance of having a new engine, like an NPU or neural processing unit for AI, Newer power management, like low power E-cores, and driven by our Foveros 3D packaging technology. That's where Intel is kind of stacking elements of the CPU die on top of one another, a bit like AMD did with its 3D V-cache, and bringing everything together. So when our architects put our Meteor Lake architecture together, they were working towards that time frame, but with the next generation, i.e. Lunar Lake, they could already see ways of enhancing the different cores, the GPU core, the NPU, and power management. For example, we had 2 E-cores, so efficient cores with Meteor Lake, and something we realized pretty quickly is that we would see more beneficial power savings to having more of those E-cores and with a larger cache, and that's exactly what we've got with Lunar Lake here. That's where Lunar Lake's 50% power savings come from compared to earlier CPUs. So we could drive more applications on those E-cores without having to engage the more power-hungry P-cores. So we're learning as we go with these hybrid architectures and also with the power and performance balance with those hybrid core designs. So it's a really interesting way of working with it, because when Intel isn't just improving the architecture and increasing core counts, it's working out how to best balance the performance cores and the E-cores and potentially increasing one set of cores based on the findings that it gets from one generation to the next. And obviously it's kind of omitting here and later on that the first iteration, the 12th gen CPUs with Alder Lake, wasn't the best way to actually have things, and obviously we'll learn a bit more later about hyperthreading. We'll get to that question in just a moment. So my next question was about Intel's Evo standard. So that's something that I'm pretty passionate about, because I love anything that makes it easier for consumers to buy and own the best products for them, whether it's PC hardware or laptops, and Evo really does that, because it kind of sets a standard that laptop manufacturers have to meet in terms of battery life, in terms of how heavy the laptop is, performance, and we're getting onto other areas such as screen and webcam quality as well. So this is my question about Intel Evo and where it stands at the moment, given that we've got a new processor coming out soon that's going to be much more powerful. I've been following Intel's Evo standard ever since it was the unbranded Project Athena, which incidentally is in this one. And as I thought it was a great idea, having a standard that makes it easier to pick up a laptop that guarantees a quality experience in terms of battery life, performance, and features. Has the Intel Evo standard evolved much over time? And this is David's response. Again, a great question. It hasn't really changed its goals, but it's still to offer the best uncompromised mobile experience. The types of applications, though, are evolving. AI, for example, wasn't part of the plan back then when we introduced Evo. At the very beginning, we didn't really appreciate how much the core components would vary as well and have such an impact on performance. For example, screen panels, memory, and even SSDs can have a big effect on your power profile. So with a few generations of Evo now under our belt, we learned so much about the system, ingredients and variations, so we're now in a much better position to guide the industry on how to put together the best configuration. And that's something I really love about Evo, is that Intel is constantly working with laptop manufacturers to maintain and push forward the Evo standard. And that's something that isn't really done in many other parts of the industry, at least as far as a standard set of hardware components goes. And it's not to say that each Evo laptop is identical. They still have very different traits, and some get good reviews and some don't get as good reviews. So there's still a lot of customization that the laptop manufacturers have to do themselves. It's just that core component list of processor, the weight of the laptop, and just the general quality and battery life of it are usually at a minimum level, and some obviously exceed that. So David went on to say, from a user perspective, since Meteor Lake, we added testing to balance cool and quiet performance operation. We know how to boost performance, obviously, but doing that without generating a lot of heat or noise is key, as well as maintaining battery life. So now we have 4 competing things that we're learning from with Meteor Lake, and added testing criteria for cool and quiet operation too. So that's one example. And with Lunar Lake, our latest processor, we have an increased focus on gaming and can run AAA games at playable frame rates. And as I mentioned earlier, I can absolutely corroborate that. I saw Formula 1 2024 running at about 70 FPS. at 1080p with ultra settings on one of these new Core Ultra CPUs. So no dedicated AMD or NVIDIA GPU in there. It was just running off the Core Ultra processor, Lunar Lake processor, which was really impressive. So I was purposely going around and touching all the laptops that were in the gaming area, and to touch the back of the laptops with my hand, and they were not even worn. In fact, they were very cool and very quiet. So that's what we wanted to see. The webcam is something we've recently added too. So pixels and resolution are important, but they aren't always indicative of image quality. So we are raising the bar for what is expected there with Intel Evo as well. So yeah, really interesting on Intel Evo, and that's something that Intel is going to continue to push forwards. And it's just going to be interesting to see how that manifests itself in the latest generation of laptops, which are out very, very soon. Now is the big question. So it's about hyperthreading. So this is my question to David. And I said the removal of hyperthreading with Lunar Lake is a big move, and it's what's been rumored with desktop Arrow Lake due later this year as well. Won't this result in a lack of multi-threaded performance compared to previous generations? Would you say that what would you say to those that are concerned about that? Was there reasoning behind this, mainly power efficiency related? And also, hyperthreading has been a very long-standing feature with Intel CPUs, so it seems quite drastic. And David's reply was this. So hyperthreading was a great idea, and our engineers figured that we're loading the compute pipeline, but we're not fully utilizing it. Because it's like building a car on a manufacturing pipeline. This is the analogy I referred to earlier. I want to make sure that every station is utilized all the time in that pipeline. So when they built the data pipelines and hyperthreading was implemented, they were using 100% of that pipeline all the time, along with a relatively small overhead in terms of power and extra space on the CPU die to get another thread. So however, it was more for a desktop market than a mobile market, and the expectations for mobile devices back then were far lower than they are today, where we have expectations of up to 20 plus hours battery life, and I would have to agree with that. So when we first introduced hybrid cores, E-cores and P-cores with our 12th gen architecture and Alder Lake, there were some discussions about whether implementing hyperthreading with that as well was achieving the best battery life and power efficiency. We've learned a lot through the generations since Alder Lake and began to understand that actually a hybrid architecture with E-cores is the most efficient way to deliver the balance between high performance, including multi-threaded performance, and maintaining lower powers. So that's quite a statement, because they're basically saying that actually if we manage these E-cores and P-cores as efficiently as possible, then having more E-cores and utilizing them properly can actually remove the need for hyperthreading, which at this point is, I wouldn't say it's superfluous, but certainly on the mobile space, it's just resulting in a lot of extra power consumption for not much gain, and the E-cores are actually picking up a lot of that slack. So moving on, and he goes on to say that even with a hybrid architecture, you could still have hyperthreading and push forward some performance metrics, but hyperthreading will hit us negatively on power efficiency and power per thread. So overall, it's a net neutral or even a net negative result, which is why Lunar Lake doesn't support it. So in the past, especially on desktop, this wasn't much of a concern, but even on desktop, enthusiasts are definitely paying more attention to power consumption. Just to cut in there, I would definitely agree with that. I think all of us would like to have seen less power draw from our 12th, 13th, and especially 14th gen CPUs. So I think Intel is definitely taking power consumption seriously now. The whole industry really is more focused on a balanced approach to low levels of power for the same performance. And for us, Lunar Lake is the culmination of everything that we've learned from the previous generations of hybrid core architectures, fully leveraging the benefits of low power E-cores, including more cache with them. And that turned out to be a better trade-off than maintaining hyperthreading. So it's a really interesting interview with Intel, because it's sort of explaining a lot of the questions that a lot of us had over its removal of hyperthreading with Lunar Lake that we kind of knew was coming a while ago. And it also explains maybe why we might not see hyperthreading on Arrow Lake. Now, for me, what will be really interesting is getting the Arrow Lake Core 200 series, Core Ultra 200 series desktop processor the flagship one there and comparing that in multi-threaded performance to the Core i9 4900K. That would be a really interesting mashup, because the 4900K is a multi-threaded powerhouse. You know, you've got hyper-threading enabled, you've got loads of cores, lots of power, and it will just be very interesting to see whether there's a performance regress there going from one generation to another. On the flip side of that, this is basically pointing at far more efficient CPUs coming from Intel. Now, sure, we're probably not going to see the same crazy low power numbers that we do in a Lunar Lake CPU on our desktop CPUs, where, you know, obviously desktop is always going to be using a lot more power. But what I'm hoping to see is much lower, or significantly lower, power consumption from Arrow Lake, and that will be really, really interesting to see further along the line when those CPUs are launched, hopefully in October, November time this year, as to what we're actually getting, both in terms of multi-threaded performance and in terms of power consumption. So definitely one to watch is Arrow Lake when it launches later this year. And also, if you're in the market for a new laptop, I would definitely consider waiting for Lunar Lake and the Core Ultra Series 2 processors to land, because they were seriously impressive at the event that I viewed in Berlin recently with Intel. So that's it from me today. I'd like to thank David Feng for taking the time in Germany to talk to me. And also thank you to you guys for watching this video. If you'd like to see more of them, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications, and also like and comment on this video down below as well. And you can check out all the links in the bottom in the description for a lot of interesting links that you might be interested in terms of where to buy the best products. And I even have an Amazon shop as well, where I've linked all my tried and tested products down there in the description down below. So that's it from me today. Thanks again to Intel. Thanks to you guys for watching, and I'll be back very, very soon.